Back in 2006, there was a trip planned 2 years prior to go prospecting for gold, and went through all the process to get the permission from the native corporations that own the land and what have you to potentially stake a claim. So we left mid September. We left the day after my birthday, which was September 13th in '06. And it took a couple days of travel going up to Nuyakuk because the elder that was with us was in his 60s. And so it was slow traveling. But when we got there, we unloaded everything on off the banks of the Nuyakuk River into an old salmon counting tower. And we weren't there, but I mean, less than a couple hours, and it just gotten dark out, and the whole place just creaked. And the problem is there was no wind. So immediately we think, a bear, because we're on a salmon river, man. It's the largest salmon return in the world in that area. So we assumed a bear, and we both got the spotlight. I was using the spotlight, and I had a shotgun, and we swing open the door just to run this bear off. And as we're sweeping from the riverbank side to our right, panning over to our left, when we got just about the 10 o'clock position, we saw three sets of eye shine. And this eye shine was like fence post markers, very, very vivid. And these things didn't try to duck and hide from the light. They didn't care. And we're only a half step outside the door. So we immediately shut the door. All it had was a little J hook. We shut that, locked it, which was a joke. But so as soon as we shut that J hook, it felt real muffled inside that little space. It's only 8 foot square with a little 50 style trailer off the back. So there wasn't much room. Like standing in the middle of the room, I could reach out, touch everyone in there. But my cousin's standing right off my left shoulder, and I'm trying to express to the elder, hey, there's hairy man out there. And I was asking my cousin, hey, you saw what I saw, right? And in the midst of that, trying to communicate, he flops under the table immediately to my left, and he's got a death grip on the barrel of this 30-06. And we look, and he's looking opposite side of the room at the window with a sheer look of terror. And so I turn, and I'm holding the shotgun offhanded because I just set down the spotlight. And as I look at the window, I see a face looking back, and the face was just above the brow and just below the nose, filled an 18-inch gap. That was the window. And as soon as I turned and made contact with it with my eyes, it turned and from looking at my cousin to looking at me. And within 2 seconds, I knew it was all bad. I felt like food, and there was this primal protect yourself, protect yourself. So I shot 3 times through the wall because this thing started moving, and it screamed. The whole place shifted. It almost took me off my feet, but I thought it was going to throw us in the river because we were less than like 15 feet from the riverbank, where this little place sat, because there was an old counting tower. Like there was this little ladder system right outside where old school guys used to climb up it and literally count salmon one at a time. So that happens, and it goes dead quiet. Um, my cousin's still under the table. He's locked up. He's kind of incoherently babbling and not really making sense. My elder, he shut down, and so essentially I ended up sitting there for a little more than a handful of hours with my own thoughts and pumping this damn Coleman lantern. I still can't stand a light above my head or that hiss of a Coleman lantern. But anyway, so I basically sat there terrified. I was real shaky at first because I'm trying to grasp, like, of all the years before, typically when there would be an encounter, it would make noise. We would leave the area, and there wasn't really an ominous type of thing happening. So it was the first time I've ever had them like right up on us, like hyper aggressive. So I'm sitting there, and I basically resigned myself to death. I did not think I was going to see the other side of it. And that was the only, looking back at it, that was the only thing that kept me from going and laying down in the bunk. Was I figured I was a dead man. I just shot this thing, and I didn't want to. I was going to go with a fight. I wasn't going to just go quietly. So after hours of sitting there, finally my cousin starts talking to me. I get him up, and kind of back with me, and we start plotting our escape. Because it's like 20 feet to the riverbank and a 7-foot drop down to get in the skiff and get the hell out of there. And so as we're talking, um, he brings up, let's spotlight, let's see if we can spot them before we go, because it was real dangerous to even attempt to go in the dark anyway. But we had to go, you know.
Yeah.
So we spotlight the riverbank side and see nothing. And trust me, we were looking, we were spotting for anything we could. And we had a fresh battery in this million candle watt powered spotlight deal, old school, you know, took the big square 6-volt battery, but we had a fresh one in there. So when we go to the side that we saw the eye shine, um, we were getting this mirrored effect from the Coleman lantern behind us. So we killed the Coleman and we're spotlighting the tree line, which is approximately about 45, 50 yards away. And we start panning back, and we saw nothing where we initially saw the 3. But as we got back to where this old outhouse was, the outhouse is about 8.5 feet tall. Well, once we got to that point, behind that a little ways was this huge black hulking figure. Um, it absorbed the light. Like,
Oh, interesting.
yeah, the size was one thing. It was very impressive in size, but the scariest thing for me was that fresh beam on that spotlight, it wasn't giving anything back. It was just absorbing the light, and it really felt like a big black nothing was just right over there to get, you know, to come get us. But so immediately we kill that. We're tucked back in this little cubby hole, which is that 50 style trailer. All the windows had been blacked out and boarded up because summertime up here, land of the midnight sun. So when they're doing their jobs, they needed a dark place to sleep. Anyway, so we're tucked back there, and I got my shotgun pointed at the one window, and he's got the 30-06 pointed at the other window. It's pitch black. We can't see anything, but you know we're out of our minds with fear at that point. As it stayed quiet, because we heard nothing. This thing just started moving. We killed the light, but it was dead quiet. There wasn't a sound. We didn't feel anything in the ground and none of that kind of movement. And we sat there for a while. And after it got quiet and calmed down, we started communicating more about getting out of there. And as we were trying to formulate a game plan, my cousin, he was not still fully, he wasn't with me. He was talking about this little nail, 16 penny nail we'd been kicking around all afternoon. He wanted to nail the door shut with just this one little nail. And I was like, look, you gotta, you gotta stay with me here, man. That nail ain't doing nothing. You just stay with me. And so I got him to snap out of that mindset, because I told him we're not barricading ourselves anywhere. We got to go.
Yep.
But as we were sitting there, we formulate our game plan. Now, time is passing. I'm saying it rather quickly, but there was a lot more going on that I don't want to get into with the elder and whatnot. Um, but we formulate our game plan, and it sounded like it was in the near distance, rotor wash from a helicopter, this thump, 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 thump kind of sound. And then we started feeling it in the ground, and one of these things ran past the shack. And, you know, the way it seemed was like they were staged around us, because when that one ran by, a whole commotion of thumping on the ground and running, and uh, the terror kicked in again. Now, there was a lot of different noises going on outside, a lot of different noises, but I couldn't honestly pinpoint one single thing that stood out, like a hoot, a whoop, and whatever. It was all just terror. It was white knuckle terror. Like I still felt like they were toying with us. It almost felt like they're trying to feed on our fear. It may not have been, but it felt that way. It felt like they were intentionally trying to provoke something from us. Um,
Whoa.
so that went on for about 10, 15 minutes. But during that time, it would be a bunch of activity around the outside, and then it was like they would back off a little bit and then do it again. So it was like you'd hear the thumping, you'd feel it in the ground, you would hear noises, and then it would go quiet again, and then it would do it again. So it went off and on like that. I couldn't tell you how many times because I was half expecting the place to rip apart and us to be smashed against a tree. Um, so once that ended and it got dead, yeah, um, I couldn't tell you how much time had passed, but that time of year, we're basically on a 12-12 light cycle, so 12 hours of daylight, 12 hours of darkness. Well, we were getting on in towards the morning hours once that stopped. And so it got quiet. We got quiet. We calmed down. We started communicating again because in those moments, at one point when they were running around or whatever, I could hear something sniffing the trailer, and that just it it bothers me. Anyway, so that goes on. It stops. It gets quiet, and we're talking again, and we get our game plan formulated. We're not bringing none of that stuff with us that we brought. We had thousands of dollars worth of prospecting equipment, uh, brand new stove, all sorts of stuff. We were geared up, but we were leaving it all. So we got our game plan, and it's not light out, but it's starting to get light. Off in the distance, there's the slightest hint of light, and so we're planning on as soon as it's light enough for us to see, clearly at the river, so we don't run into deadfall trees in the water or big rocks because the Nuyakuk has a lot of rocks in it. We're gonna make a break. So as we're discussing this, again, I don't know the exact amount of time. It had to have been at least 45 minutes after that stop that we started getting, and probably another hour maybe before we had finalized what we were gonna do. And so it was just getting light enough to where we could see the silhouette of the top of the trees. And so we knew it wouldn't be long before we could go.
Yep.
And as we're sitting there talking, it's progressively getting lighter, and we hear what sounds like a pellet gun shooting the side of this place.
Oh,
And it started in the cadence of like a thuck, thuck, thuck kind of sound. And then all of a sudden it was a hailstorm of just all on the one side. And 2020 hindsight, not one window was broken, which really, anyway, it just weird stuff that stands out in those moments. But so that stopped. And so again, once that started, we were right back into that little cubby area. Rifles crossed again, just it went chaotic. And so that quieted down, and we sat there probably another almost an hour, and it was definitely getting lighter where I didn't need a spotlight to see the tree line. I couldn't see into the trees because it was still dark and silhouetted by the canopy, but we could see enough to get the hell out of there.
yes, sir.
So it being quiet, we got right up on the door. We got it ready to go. My cousin was in front of me, my elder behind me, and took one more quick look out the windows and made our go for it. Now, when we got it, it only took a few steps to get to the riverbank because it was only 20 feet. It seemed like 10 miles at the time, but get to the riverbank. My cousin jumps down, start up the skiff, and I squat down a little bit to help my elder get his footing because we're on a cut bank and there was dew on the grass. So once he got his footing, I had to scoot back a little bit because of how I was positioned. I felt like I was gonna be forced forward. So I scooted back a little bit, stood up, and just as I got to full height, a rock whizzed past my face. And the only thing that saved me from that rock was just scooting back that 4 to 6 inches, saved it from that rock taking me out. That rock, as soon as it whizzed past my face, everything went kind of slow motion, and I followed it, and it impacted the river in about 3 feet of water so hard it hit the bottom of the river before the water closed over it. So it was very forceful, and that rock had to have been thrown from that distance before I had stood up. So they were anticipating where I was going to be and were really, really accurate, but I slid back a little bit and kind of changed that. So as soon as the rock hit, immediately I whipped to my left, and that big black thing, that mass was coming out of the trees. And I put 3 shots on it with the 30-06. Because when we stacked up on the door to go out it, my cousin had the shotgun and I had the 30-06. So I put 3 shots on it. I heard the bullets hit this thing. It did not. It stopped moving forward, but it didn't buckle. It didn't flinch. It just took all three of these shots and did nothing. And I jumped down the bank. I had to cut the line, and we got out of there. That's the condensed version of what happened.